It's been 34 years since the gruesome murders of Matthew Goniwe, Sparrow Mkhonto, Sicelo Mhlawuli, and Fort Calata. History remembers them as the Cradock Four, a term that in many ways camouflages who they were, their massive sacrifice, and who they left behind. Wives, children, and grandchildren who they will never know. We kick off our series, Women of the Liberation, by speaking to the Calata family about the husband and father for whom justice is yet to come. There were many casualties in the fight for South Africa's liberation, and the effects of those devastating losses still echo in the generations left behind. The story of the Cradock Four still haunts our frail democracy, and 34 years later, no one has been held accountable for the vicious torture and murder of the young political activists. We know some of the facts. We know that Fort Calata, alongside Matthew Goniwe, Sparrow Mkhonto, and Sicelo Mhlawuli, were on a secret police hit list for their part in the anti-apartheid protests in the Karoo town of Cradock. We know that their car was intercepted on the night of the 27th of June 1985, just outside Port Elizabeth, as they were making their way home. We know the young political activists were tortured and murdered, their bodies burnt and dumped in various locations. We know that on the day of their funeral, which was attended by thousands of people from around the world, then President P.W. Botha declared the 1985 state of emergency. But what is seldom talked about is the inherited trauma of these events on these families, on the Calata family. Nomonde Calata, the young mother of two, heavily pregnant with their third child, the children who lost their father, the child who never got to meet him, and the everyday battle to find a way to live with the knowledge of how Fort Calata died, his final moments. Thank you so much to both of you for allowing us into your home, allowing us the time and the space to go back into your history. For you, Ma'am Nomonde, when we first called you for the interview, and I'm sure you've had these kinds of calls many times before, to know that you're now going to go back into that part of your life, how does that feel for you?
It's something that I live every day. Because even when I walk in the streets, ordinary people are reminding me of what happened. As I see, it is going to be difficult for me to be able to live as Nomonde, an individual, without being linked to my husband, who was a political activist, who was a leader in his community. People are expecting me also to be treated as a leader in the community. And sometimes I don't feel like a leader.
I mean, in Cradock, everywhere we look, the roads are named after the Calata family. I imagine that is also a constant reminder. You've chosen to continue to build your life here with your family. And I suppose as a result, your future, your present, who you are, is the wife and widow of Fort.
Yes, that is my life. That is even how people are addressing me. Nomonde, Fort's wife.
And you know, that for me is what is particularly difficult about your story as part of this series. Because this series is about women of the liberation movement, women of the struggle, and giving those women the voice that they deserve. But your story is so knitted together with Fort's story. So for a moment, I want to just try and take us back to Nomonde before Fort. Is that a story that you're able to pull back out of your memory?
Nomonde before Fort. Nomonde was always responsible. Nomonde liked life with her friends. Nomonde liked to dance very much.
And then that teenage Nomonde met her first serious boyfriend.
Yeah, Nomonde met her serious boyfriend, Fort, also in a dance place. Fort was making music. It took me to dance, and I danced with him. He couldn't dance, but I danced with him. And
what were you thinking at this point? Handsome guy?
Nothing. You know, he was this pitch black boy with big eyes, big ears, and at that time there was somebody else, you know, very handsome, but it was not a serious thing. But then Ford came in, met me at the gate, hold my hand the first day, and my friends were like, "He's ugly. No, you mustn't take him. He's not good for you," and all that type of things. He's pitch black. And we had our understanding. It was not immediate. Yeah. After a week or so, he maybe traced me and heard where I was schooling. So he waited for me that afternoon. So we walked. And still then, I said to him, "No, man, some other time." But then he insists. And then we fell in love. And it was a serious thing. Couple of months thereafter, his friend was with us, and we were standing by a dam, and he called his friend. He said, "Come, I want you to witness this marriage." And his friend came, and he said, "I'm getting married today to Nomonde, and she's my wife, I'm her husband." And he said, "I'm a witness." And it ended there, and we laughed, and I went home, and they went. And I remember when we really now got married, he whispered in my ear and said, "We are doing this for them. We're long married. We are just doing it officially for our parents, but we know that we're long married." As a result, when I got the fall by getting pregnant with Dorothy, he didn't want me to register Dorothy on my maiden name because he said Dorothy's his child. And
because you were married?
Yeah, and his child will be registered on his name. So that is me as teenage and
in love.
In love, very much so. Ford loved me and I loved him. We were friends. He was my brother. At the same time, he was my husband, you know. That is why sometimes I think that I committed myself to raise my children in a very decent manner, in honor of him, to show him how much I respect him and how much I loved him. It's for me. To bring up his children in a decent manner. And I'm very proud of them. I'm very proud of my children.
Dorothy, this, it's a happier time, but it's still obviously painful for your mom to take herself back to that time. And as hard and as painful as it is, it must warm your heart to know that their relationship really began out of a real friendship and it's a real love story.
Yeah, it's always been a real love story, and I guess I've always known the story too, because one of the things that happened was, at the time, my mom used to live at her home. It was after the Group Areas Act, so they were taken away from Emakubeni, which is the old location where everybody used to stay together, and my dad and them had to stay in Lingelihle, and my mom was moved with her family to Michosdal. So when I sort of reached around about age 3, 4, when I started understanding, let me put it like that, my parents were living in 2 different areas. So I would know when Fort is back, then he would come over to come and fetch me. So I used to literally cross over the fence because I used to go from Michosdal to Lingelihle. There was a fence that divided the 2 areas. And when we reached a particular spot, I had to sort of cross. And my dad and I had to have this game where I would like cross at the lower level. So it would be like a competition that would I be able to crawl through without me being maybe hooked by one of the fences and things. And that was a game that we always played. But that, I grew up knowing that when Fort is around, I'm going to have to go that side. So this child was speaking in Afrikaans this side, and when I got to Elokshin, I had to speak in Xhosa. But what it emphasized is the love that they had for each other. And it sort of also emphasized how much we were loved. The love that my father had for my mother was not just a love for her only. It was also a love for his brothers and sisters, a love for other children, a love for the people of Cradock, a love for South Africans, a love. So there's this shared notion of love. Sometimes I feel pity for my mom for having have lost her love at such a young age, and for having have had to deal with such a great responsibility of having to love a nation at such a young age. But my father was like a father to everyone. He gave us these names. We have our nicknames. I won't say them now. But we have our nicknames, and it's our Cradock nicknames. And if somebody calls us that, then we know that that person has had direct contact with my father. One of the things that he did would be to share at school. He never taught any child who was a hungry child. Mm-mm. So up to today, when people see us, they would remind us that, your father would buy bread and buy juice and bring it to school, let alone the political struggle. But those small things that he did because he was a loving person and a caring person. To be a political widow is not like any other widow. Some other widows get time to mourn and heal, and they're given space to forget about this.